You've probably seen the meme, Gen X, raised on hose water and neglect. It shows up on t shirts, in TikTok comments, on coffee mugs. And it's funny because it's true. Not literally, though many of us did drink from the hose because coming inside for water meant risking being given more chores. But true in the way that humor lands when it names something we've all agreed not to talk about seriously. The neglect wasn't malicious. Many of our parents were not cruel. They were often working multiple jobs, navigating their own divorces, and trying to survive economic instability. So you learned early complaining doesn't change outcomes. Asking for help often means being told to go figure it out yourself. And ultimately, the fastest path forward is usually the one you build alone. And for a long time, that approach worked. You became the person you are today, the one everyone can count on, the one who doesn't need handholding, and the one who didn't create drama, the one who just handled it. You wear that identity with a certain pride, maybe even with humor, hence the popularity of the meme. If you've ever worn that "I got this" badge, even when you're not sure you do, go ahead and click that like button. Lets us all know that we're not alone in this. But here's the part the meme doesn't capture. That same self-reliance, the one that made you so capable, has a physiological cost that compounds over time. And at midlife, that cost is coming due. Because you learned stoicism so young, you may not register your own stress signals anymore. You keep functioning while stress accumulates in your body. The tension that lives in your jaw, the sleep that won't come at 3 a.m., the brain fog you dismiss as just being tired, the irritability that surfaces over small things. These aren't separate issues. They're your nervous system trying to tell you something you were trained not to hear. There's research on this. A study conducted during COVID that looked at how different generations handled the pandemic stress. I'll put the link in the description. Generation X reported the highest stress levels, but lower rates of depression and anxiety than younger generations. Not because Gen X was handling it better, but because many didn't name the stress as distress. You just kept going because that's what we learned to do. And here's what happens when stress goes unnamed for decades. Your body registers it anyway. Heart disease, autoimmune conditions, chronic inflammation, digestive issues that will not resolve. Long-term stress shows up as disease, literally dis-ease in your body. The medical term is chronic stress response. The lived experience is you're exhausted in a way sleep doesn't fix. This isn't about blaming your childhood. It's about understanding what made sense then and what's costing you now. Growing up as latchkey kids, we all developed a fierce independence because adult presence wasn't reliable. You learned healthy skepticism because institutions failed us repeatedly with economic crashes, political scandals, and promises that didn't hold. That skepticism was adaptive, protected us. It taught us to question claims, assess risk, trust your own judgment. But here's what often happens in midlife. That healthy skepticism can curdle into protective cynicism. Skepticism says, show me the evidence, I'm listening. Cynicism says, nothing will change anyway, why bother? Skepticism is open-minded questioning. Cynicism is closed presumption. And the shift is subtle, so subtle you might not notice, when protection became isolation, when discernment became dismissal, when self-reliance became an inability to ask for help, even when the demands are objectively unsustainable. Because here's what's true right now. You're in the most compressed caregiving period any generation has faced. Caring for aging parents who are living longer with chronic and often complicated conditions. Parenting teenagers or young adults who launched later because you launched later. Managing careers in workplaces that are passing you over. Keeping boomers in leadership longer. Promoting millennials faster. And leaving Gen X lost in the middle. This isn't something you can just tough out anymore. Here's what makes this so hard to see. You're still high functioning. From the outside, you're getting everything done. Showing up to every obligation, managing multiple caregiving roles, performing well at work, maintaining the household. Never complaining. But inside, you might be experiencing chronic low-level panic you can't quite name. Needing more coffee to start the day, more wine to stop thinking at night. Snapping at people you love over minor things. Forgetting words mid-sentence. Brain fog you dismiss as just tired. Waking at 3 a.m. with racing thoughts about everything left undone. Physical symptoms you're ignoring, headaches, digestive issues, chest tightness. A constant sense of being one crisis away from collapse. You're driving a car with the check engine light on for years. The car still runs, so you keep driving. Until one day it doesn't, and everyone is shocked because you seemed fine. This is what high-functioning erosion looks like. You maintain the exterior while the interior hollows out. And because you learned early that complaining doesn't help, you don't name it as a problem until your body forces the issue. So let's talk about grieving that part of adaptation that was so important. This requires real honesty. The thing you're proudest of, your resilience, your independence, your ability to handle anything, may be the very thing keeping you from peace. That's not failure, it's development. What worked at one stage of life can become maladaptive in the next, not because you chose wrong, but because conditions changed. And here's the paradox. You'll need to use your greatest strength, your adaptability, to adapt away from your primary survival strategy. That requires grieving an identity. The identity of the one who doesn't need help. The identity of the one who never complains. Because holding on to that identity might be costing you your health, your relationships, your capacity to be present for the parts of life that matter most. Adaptation is also a superpower of Gen X, and it's time to accept that what worked in the past may be keeping you from fully engaging in life, costing you your peace and your health. So what's the alternative? It's not dependency. It's not becoming the person who can't function without constant support. It's what I'll call strategic interdependence, choosing when and how to leverage support before you're in crisis. At home, this might mean creating a shared caregiving calendar with your siblings instead of defaulting to handling your parents' needs alone. Hiring help for specific tasks like meal prep, cleaning, medical coordination. not as a luxury, but as capacity management. Asking your teenagers to take on legitimate household responsibilities, not because you're failing, but because they're capable and you're at capacity. At work, it might mean building a circle of trust of peers you actually share challenges with, not just pleasant small talk. Or delegating tasks based on others' strengths instead of it's faster if I just do it myself. Asking for mentorship on the specific gaps you have, like emerging tech you don't fully understand yet. Emotionally, it might mean saying, I'm at capacity before you reach the breaking point. Actually going to the doctor when symptoms persist, not dismissing them as just stress. Accepting that therapy isn't weakness. The shift isn't about needing people for everything. It's about assessing your actual capacity honestly and building support accordingly. Self-Reliance says, I can handle this alone. Strategic interdependence says, I could handle this alone, but at what cost? And then there's the attitude shift. Let's face it, our generation, a little salty. Our skepticism, that sharp ability to spot bullshit, is valuable. Let's not lose it. But watch for the moment when it crosses into cynicism. Here's a real example. Imagine your company announces a mentorship program for younger employees. A skeptical response sounds like, what's the time commitment? How are mentors matched? What support does the company provide? What's the actual goal here? Retention, development of skills, culture building? And let me assess if this is worth my time. A cynical response sounds like, oh, great, another unpaid labor scheme disguised as opportunity. They'll use this for PR, give us no resources, then blame us when it doesn't work. Hard pass. The skeptic might discover it's actually designed and offers meaningful work. The cynic never finds out because the door is already closed. That's the cost. Cynicism protects you from disappointment, but it also protects you from connection, from growth, from participation. It isolates you in the name of self-protection. And at midlife, when you're already managing so much alone, isolation compounds the problem. There's a developmental task that becomes available in midlife, and Generation X is uniquely positioned to claim it. Eric Erickson called it generativity, the shift from building your own success to contributing to what comes next. For Gen X, that looks like becoming the bridge generation. You understand both worlds. You remember analog. You learn digital. You speak the language of the baby boomers who won't retire and millennials who are taking over. You've lived through enough economic cycles to spot patterns younger colleagues can't see yet. The mentorship role, the cultural translation, the institutional memory, these aren't consolation prizes for being passed over. They're the actual developmental work of this stage. But here's the honest part, and I'm not going to skip this. This reframe only works if you can afford to stop climbing. And most people in our generation can't, because retirement savings are insufficient, because elder care is expensive, because college tuition is crushing. So I'm not going to tell you to just embrace mentorship as though that solves the financial pressure. It doesn't. What I will say is this: the generativity work might give you something the climb never did, a sense of meaning that's not dependent on the next promotion. It won't fix your 401k, but it might give you a reason to show up that doesn't erode your health. So if you're Generation X and you recognize yourself in any of this, you're not broken, you're not behind, you're certainly not failing at resilience. You're experiencing the cost of an adaptation that was necessary when we were young, but it's unsustainable now. The work ahead isn't becoming less capable. It's becoming more honest about what capacity actually means. It's learning to feel and express stress before your body forces the issue. It's shifting from cynicism back to skepticism, maintaining discernment without closing off possibility. It's building strategic interdependence, not because you're weak, but because the demands are real. And it's accepting that the generativity work, the mentorship, the bridge building, the cultural translation might be the actual developmental task, even if it's not the financial solution you need. This isn't a clean answer. Midlife rarely is, but it is an honest one. And if these conversations help you see your own patterns more clearly, help you distinguish between what's serving you and what's eroding you, why don't you go ahead and subscribe? You got this far by being tougher than you needed to be. Maybe the next phase is about being more honest than you're comfortable with.